As cases rise, lockdown measures get tighter. As expected on Monday, Paris authorities announced new measures to try and stem rising case numbers, particularly among the 20 to 30 age group. The first target will be the city's famous bars.
À compter donc de demain.
From tomorrow, all bars will have to be closed. Restaurants, which are defined as establishments whose main activity is the sale of meals, will be able to remain open at their usual times, subject to strict compliance and with a new health protocol.
The shutdown will initially last 2 weeks, but will also include gyms and swimming pools. There'll be limits on the numbers in shopping centres and a ban on music in public after 10 p.m. Paris is seeing a lot of new cases, with more than 200 so-called clusters. 30% of the city's intensive care beds are taken up with COVID-19 patients. It's nothing like as bad as March, but it's moving in the wrong direction.
Cette situation est durable.
The situation is durable. In fact, the life can continue to unfold, albeit not to the extent as before. But democratic life, economic life, cultural life, social life can of course also have its own space and rhythm, which are absolutely essential.
It's not a view universally shared.
We have to ask yourself the question, will closing bars prevent the spread of the virus? We don't have an answer today.
It's sad because people are going together in their homes, so there is no point in closing the bars.
Here, as elsewhere in Europe, there is growing skepticism surrounding lockdowns and their costs, both economic and social. On Friday, there was coordinated pot banging by restaurant staff. In Marseille, where similar measures are already in place, there have been widespread protests. In Spain, there's an even bigger surge in cases. Over the weekend, travel restrictions and other measures were imposed on Madrid. Cases are increasing across Europe as winter approaches, and governments are struggling to strike a balance between fighting the outbreak and letting people live a normal life. Simon McGregor-Wood, TRT World.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Shahin Vallee in Marseille. He's a senior fellow at the German Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome to the program, Shahin. Now, the numbers coming out of France are just staggering. So the country had almost 30,000 new infections just over the weekend alone, which helped to prompt these new measures in Paris and the surrounding suburbs. Can you just tell us more about just how bad the situation is in places like Paris, Marseille, where you are, and across the country?
Yeah, the situation has turned for the worse in the last few weeks. It's important to stress, however, that France has been undertaking far more testing in the last couple of months than it was able to undertake in March. So the numbers we see now are not exactly comparable to the numbers we were seeing back then. A lot of the new rise we see is also largely linked to a massive rise in our ability to test. So I think the central question for France is not so much the number of new cases, it's the rate and the occupancy of our emergency health services. And as you rightly pointed out in your reporting, we are now operating at about 30% of capacity, and the projections we're making is that we could reach close to full capacity by the end of November if the surge in cases continues at this rate. So this is why it's important to take containment measures, not so much to deal with the number of cases, but to deal with the number of emergency cases that we have to take to the hospital.
Now, as we heard in Simon's package there, Paris and the surrounding suburbs have been put on maximum alert. They've ordered bars to close from Tuesday, but they've resisted closing restaurants for now. What impact will these latest measures have on an economy that's already struggling?
Well, these will have an acute economic effect, and that's why they've been postponed for as long as possible. These measures were actually more aggressive measures were taken in Marseille a week ago, where restaurants were actually asked to close down, and restaurants are going to reopen in Marseille this week. So, local authorities are struggling to calibrate exactly the right set of measures to take. In Paris, they've decided to leave restaurants open and close the bars. It might be that in a week or so, they conclude that restaurants also in Paris have to be closed. So this is a matter of trial and error. I think the great danger with these measures is we try to postpone them as much as we can, and we only take them when they're slightly too late to have a meaningful effect, and therefore we have to get to the next stage and take more aggressive measures yet. Beyond the bar measures that you mentioned, there has been also an important measure for universities, which are being asked to cut the number of students by half that can attend classes physically. So there are quite aggressive measures being taken, and we might yet need to go to further extremes if the number of cases and the number of hospitalization doesn't slow down.
Can I ask you about the wider Eurozone now? Because IHS Markit has released its latest PMI reading of the services sector. We know the services sector, which obviously includes the hospitality industry, has been among the hardest hit during this pandemic. And the latest figures show that the services across the Eurozone took another hit in September compared with August. It seems that Spain is dragging down the wider Eurozone in this area. Are you worried that perhaps France may be in a similar position, France being the second worst hit country in terms of this resurgence in cases?
Yeah. Spain has been hit more because Spain has taken more aggressive steps to address the epidemic, and as a result is paying a higher economic cost for it. France has resisted a number of these measures and is now taking them. You know, what seems clear from these PMI numbers is that the rebound that we saw in economic activity over the summer, because the economies across Europe were reopening, is going to take a toll on the entire European recovery. So we're likely to have seen the peak in economic recovery over the summer, and we're now heading again for a recession. This is particularly worrying because we have taken now initiatives for recovery and stimulus plans that might be outdated just in a few months. You know, European governments are preparing their 2021 budgets, and they were doing so over the summer, probably thinking that the biggest part of the stimulus was behind us, and it might be that in 2021 we have to stimulate the economy even more than we have in 2020, and that is something European governments are not entirely prepared for at this stage.
Okay, Shahin Vallee from the German Council of Foreign Relations, thank you again for joining us on the program.